And hopefully it works. Yeah, that looks okay. Let me just minimize all of you chaps. Well, good morning. Good to see you here. As I said to Roger, I'm happy enough for people to be unmuted during this talk. As you know, I'm a big fan of audience participation. So if any of you have any questions or comments which won't wait till the end, then I'm more than happy to take them in the course of the talk. All of the items that I'm illustrating today are from my own collection. But I have to say that that collection was formed in the 1970s and 1980s when I was a student and recently married. So there are none of the really rare items in my collection. And it would also be fair to say, until very recently, I haven't looked at my collection for the thick end of 30 years. I have a display that I give to philatelic societies, which is called the White Rajas of Sarawak. And that is really concentrating on the life stories of the Rajas, and particularly the ladies in their lives, and its stamps, its postal history, its printed ephemera. And I've given that talk with coins added from Sarawak to a few numismatic societies. And I was due to give the talk to the Yorkshire Numismatic Society in May last year. Well, obviously that didn't happen. So when they were reprogramming for their Zoom meetings, they said, you know, everybody's going to do the same talk, but via Zoom. And I said, well, I'm not, because I can't really do it as a Zoom presentation, but I'll do you a talk on British North Borneo, because that's far more interesting from a numismatic point of view. So in the course of preparing the slides for the Yorkshire Numismatic Society, I said to Roger, if you get absolutely desperate, then I have a talk on Borneo numismatics I can show to the Ceramic Specialist Society. So clearly, at some stage in February, he realised that he was desperate, and that's how you come to have me today. Bear in mind, this was prepared for people who have no idea at all about Borneo. So the first thing I did was show them a map, which I don't need to explain to you. And then I showed them another map. And I briefly outlined the history of the northern half of Borneo and the prominence of both the Sultan of Brunei and the Sultan of Sulu, who dominated the area for several centuries before the Europeans took an interest. And I said, you know, the Brunei was important, and the first coins that were ever manufactured in Borneo were actually in Brunei. The first coins, very crude appearance. They are mainly in tin. They have some pretty weird designs. Images of camels feature quite extensively. And, you know, I can't think of a place less suited to camels than the Borneo rainforest, but there we go. These were, I knew nothing about these, and I don't think many people did until articles appeared in the Sarawak Museum Journal following Tom Harrison's excavations in the early to mid 1950s. If you are interested in these, and they very, well, I don't know them ever appearing on the market, certainly in Europe, then they are now well listed in Saran Singh's handbook, but I don't have any of those. So what you're more likely to come across, and I'm giving you a broad overview of what you might be able to collect if you're interested in British North Borneo numismatics. What you are likely to come across in terms of Brunei are the two coins that were issued dated 1868, the 1 pittis and the half pittis, which are struck in some tin lead alloy. So that's the 1 pittis piece with ceremonial type devices which you recognise, and that is the half pittis. These are not particularly common coins. You know, you can find them, but you have to hunt them down a little bit. What you can find, though, is this 1 cent piece, with which I suspect many of you will be familiar. That was struck in 1887 by Heaton's Mint in Birmingham. And when we get on to the British North Borneo Company coins, you will see that all of those were also manufactured by Heaton's, who, after the Royal Mint, were probably the largest mint in Victorian times in the UK. So moving on to the British North Borneo coins, they all have the same feature. The obverse always depicts the company arms with the motto, I undertake and I achieve. Well, that's one of the translations. So the one on the left is the common obverse. The one on the right is the obverse of the half cent. And you'll see at the bottom of the coin on the left-hand side, and just above the date on the coin on the right-hand side, you will see the H mint mark for Ralph Heaton. In giving my talk to the Yorkshire Numismatic Society, I wanted to paint a picture of what it was like in North Borneo at the time the coins were circulating, and later on we get to some medals and we get to some tokens. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with this book, which was published in, I think, 1899. It's a scarce book, but I think there is a modern reprint available. And it was, in essence, a publication by the company trying to drum up financial support, both for the company and the various trading companies, plantations that were being established in the country at the time. And what you notice, there is a map in the front of the book which shows the railway, most of it aspirational, I would say, rather than actually in existence. And down in the Darvel Bay area, you'll see all of the rivers have the word gold close by, because this is obviously, if you think that you're investing money in a company where there's lots of gold, then you know you're onto a good thing. At least that was what the authors of the book, that was their idea. And within the book, there are lots of photographs of groups of natives and all sorts of things. All of the illustrations that I show later in the talk are taken from that book. So here we have dredging for gold, and we have Mr. Prowse, the expert engineer in charge of the dredging operations, who sends us a report, and he says a telegram is daily expected, which no doubt is going to tell us that there are vast deposits to be found in the rivers. And if there are, then, you know, a fifth, a quarter of all of the profits that these companies make will come into the company's bank account. So, you know, it was a guarantee of making your fortune. And the other thing that is promoted very much in this book is the railway. So there we have a picture of the line. There we have a picture of one of the trains. Now, I'm not a train spotter, I'm a philatelist, which is probably only one grade up. But as I look at these various pictures of these trains, I actually think there's only one of them, and they've taken the photograph from a number of different angles and a number of different locations. But it's very good, and it you know, to the casual observer, it's pretty convincing. But then you get this picture of the railway line, and Well, I wouldn't fancy my chances going across there, even on a push bike, to be honest with you. But there you go. So that gives you a flavour of what the company were trying to say to drum up business at the end of the 19th century. And you can see that well over half of the exports at the time were tobacco and produce from the forests, I think you can say. And eventually we get to a piece telling us about the arrangements for the money. And it's saying we have our own notes and coins, and also coinage of Mexico Strait settlements, Hong Kong, British dollars are treated as currency. So these would be the trade dollars that was in essence silver bullion, because the company, the largest denomination of coin they issued was 5 cents. So for bullion, there were the British trade dollars. And as that piece said, the coins of the Strait settlements also circulated. And in Brunei, I mean, anything circulated there. Strait settlements coins, they had North Borneo Company coins, they had Sarawak coins, you know, anything went, particularly if it was made of bullion metal. So looking at the company's coins, and this won't take as long because there aren't all that many of them, there is the 1 cent piece, and those are the dates that are available, and those are the mintages. So you had, you know, coins issued most years in pretty large numbers. So that's the 1 cent. That's the ½ cent, as I said before, that's the one without the standard obverse, and those are the numbers struck. And you may think, well, why do they need so many coins? That tells you the total revenue generated within the country. And that is broken down. And you can see that over 1/5 of their total revenue was profit that they made by issuing coins. You know, they paid Ralph Heaton's whatever it cost, and then they issued the coins, and it was an immediate way of them generating income. This was before they latched onto the idea of cancel to order remainders to sell to gullible philatelists. But I think it's the same business model and the same ethos. It's just that they got to the idea of minting coins and issuing them quicker than they did exploiting stamp collectors. So moving on, and another money-saving device, in 1904, they went away from the previous bronze coins, and the 1 cent piece became a smaller coin struck in cupro-nickel. And as you can see, that continued spasmodically for 30 odd years. There was also a 2.5 cent coin with far lower mintages, and a 5 cent coin, which was a more popular denomination. And the only silver coin that was struck by the company was the 25 cent piece with a fairly small mintage. It was 0.5% silver, which was the going rate at the time within the United Kingdom. The UK silver coinage had gone down from 0.925 to 0.5 fineness in 1920. It's a fairly uncommon coin because obviously a lot of it was melted down, particularly during the war. And that's just an oddity, which I have, a cast forgery of a 1 cent. Why on earth anyone would go to the bother of preparing a cast and producing forgeries of that, I really don't know. So moving swiftly on to the banknotes, and this will detain you for a very brief period because I don't have very many because they are pretty scarce. That I actually did buy in a society auction very, very many years ago, and it's in absolute rubbish condition, but it is a scarce note. It's the first issue of the 25-cent note. Subsequently, in a different colour, but the same design, there were other issues up to 1925 of the 25-cent note. And then there are $1 notes in 2 sizes. 17 different dates have been recorded. And you also find 50 cents and the very rare and very expensive now $5, $10, and $25 notes. Those exist, but I don't have any of them. I ought to say, yeah, this is very much, even numismatically, a bit of a sideline collection for me, so don't expect anything too rare. I think the 2 most interesting numismatic aspects of British North Borneo are the medals and the private tokens, which I shall show you later. This is a fairly typical motley crew of the people who would receive the company medal, many of them Sikhs. And I'm not going to go into the history because you chaps know far more about it than I do. I obviously, the talk I gave to the Yorkshire Numismatic Society perhaps was lighter on the numismatic aspects and a bit more thorough on the history, simply because many of them just had, one chap admitted, he said, before the talk, I actually looked to see where North Borneo was. And I couldn't find it, but then I Googled it and found it was the same place as Sabah, which tells you everything you need to know, I guess. So this is the type of medal to which I refer. That's the obverse and that's the reverse. And there are 3 types of North Borneo Company medals. And this is the one you see most often. I've given a description of it, and there are 3 clasps that you can find: Punitive Expedition, which is 1897, Punitive Expeditions the following year, and Rundum 1915 to 16. That's the second type of medal, 1900, and that was issued in connection with the campaign at Tambunan, where Mat Salleh, of whom more later, was finally killed. And the third type of medal you can come across is, in essence, it's the company's general service medal, but in essence it's a long service and good conduct type medal. But there again, more of that later. Now, all of the medals were awarded in very small numbers, and they very rarely appear on the open market. When they do, I'd say in terms of numbers and in terms of price, you're looking at a good Sarawak Strait Settlements combination cover. I think you would struggle now to buy an original British North Borneo Company medal for under £1,000 when you looked at add-ons, and certainly some of the scarcer ones you're looking at a higher figure than that. Fortunately, from an early date, Spinks, who manufactured all of the medals, did issue specimens for collectors, and these are available, although they still command a decent price. And how do you know that it's a copy? Well, first of all, it won't be named, so you're pretty confident if it's named, it's an original. But specimens were struck in both silver and bronze, struck on both normal and on thicker flans. Many of them have copy on the rim, but if they don't, you can tell unnamed originals from the specimens because the S of son in Spink and Son is struck out. And on the General Service Medal, the device under the exerglam line is stamped out. So that's an illustration of the stamped out S in Son on some of them. And if you look to the right hand there, the end leaf is stamped out. And that's how you can tell on an unnamed medal whether it's an original that has been issued but not named, or it's a later copy. So here we have that perhaps represents more or less the whole of the strength of the armed forces, which was in effect a police force from the company, again taken from the 1899 book. And those are the sort of the white officers, and no doubt the Sikh non-commissioned officers, the sergeants, and so on. Now, in terms of the campaigns, you can find quite detailed, quite detailed descriptions in Rutter's book. There are also in Ian Black's book, A Gambling Style of Government, there are considerable details of the campaigns. I'll just come back to that. What I would say is when I deal with individual clasps, I'm taking my information from British Battles and Medals, which is the handbook of British medals. And there is some considerable, not confusion, but the conflicting information in the two publications. And I'm not absolutely certain the precise criteria for the issue of the particular clasps. In my slides, I've put in the description from British Battles and Medals, but I'm not absolutely certain that that is accurate. Without going to the original documentation, Spinks, then I don't know which is correct, but you'll get a flavour for it anyway. So the first two sets of medals, the punitive expeditions, were campaigns involving Mat Salleh. And that was how he was described by the governor in 1897. I've always thought Mat Salleh was a sort of Borneo equivalent of Robin Hood. Almost a mythical figure in terms of reputation. And he did generate a very loyal band of followers. That's a picture of him, and I always think it's a bit of a disappointment. He doesn't look to be the sort of inspirational thug at all. In fact, I think if he was around today, you could see him giving sort of historical guide, tours of historical sites, or maybe owning a small car hire business or something like that. He doesn't look to me to be a particularly inspirational leader. And that apparently, all taken from Wikipedia, the chap third from the left with a little cross above his head, that apparently is the only extant definite photograph of him. So the actual awards of the medals, that's a description, and I'll let you read the description. The two smaller clashes in July and August. The one in July, that was the attack on Gaia Island, which clearly that was a home win for Mat Salleh. When they went hunting for him later, it was that expedition to find him for which the first medals were awarded. And I think the only message I would ask you to take from this slide is the very small numbers of medals that were issued, and as will become apparent in the next minute or two, the very confusing criteria that there were for who was entitled to a medal and who was entitled to an additional clasp. and whether you could hand in your original medal and get a silver one. It's all very confusing, but it's set out, as I say, in British battles and medals. So that's the expedition, punitive expedition. Now, at the time of the attack on Gaia Island, the reason that it met with no resistance was all the police were there celebrating the Diamond Jubilee. I always love this bit, the description of what was happening in Sabah. From Black's book, he says, a parade designed to celebrate the town's polyglot population fell into some disorder when the Japanese prostitutes insisted on representing their country, which is good. So whilst the backs were turned, Mat Salleh invaded Gaia Island, and again they went hunting him down. I cannot really tell you exactly for which particular skirmishes you got the punitive expedition clasp and which one you got the punitive expeditions. It is very confusing and conflicting, and if you really want to know all about it, then Google Mat Salleh and you'll get a very big description on Wikipedia, or have a look in Rutter's book. Tambunan, again, this is after Mat Salleh. Why they had a change of design, I just don't know. I've no idea. I've never been able to find that. But the campaign, as I say, in Tambunan, resulted in Mat Salleh being killed. He was clearly such an inspirational figure that when the company finally entered the fort, they went round digging up bodies to actually find him, so that they could prove that he was finally dead, and evidence to try to quell any following, although rumours spread that he'd never really died. And I think he was almost a sort of a Lord Lucan figure. He still kept popping up 20 or 30 years later. The final campaign was in 1915, the final mopping up operations in connection with what I think is generally known as the Muruk Revolt. Again, you can see the numbers of medals issued are in small quantities. And if you read about Mr. Bunbury, I don't think you will find really the problem was just a complete misunderstanding. The company saw the native population in one way. The native population saw the company in a completely different way, and it was a lack of understanding and a conflict of cultures, I think, that produced, fairly violent but small military campaigns. Finally, there is the General Service Medal, and you can see there the criteria for being awarded this medal, and primarily it was for long and meritorious service of not less than 18 years in any capacity in North Borneo, irrespective of whether that was in chartered company service or not. If you had the patience and stamina to stay in North Borneo for 18 years, you got one of these gongs. I think that's probably as good a way of describing it as I can. And for your benefit, for the benefit of North Borneo philatelists, I have actually presented there the list of recipients of this medal, because there are names there you will undoubtedly recognise. Amongst them, the Governor Douglas James Jardine, who wasn't there for very long, hence didn't get his 18 years. But you see the first criterion was for very valuable services, so I guess the governor got that. And also his wife, for specially valuable services. She got hers, I think, when they were about to depart. So if you just want to very quickly, if you just want to very quickly scan that list to see whether there are any recipients where perhaps you have covers from or to them, you can maybe tell me all about them at the end of the talk. And then there were a few other recipients prior to the war. The next section is the private tokens, and that is well worth reading. I'll just sit back for a couple of minutes to give you the chance. It's taken directly from Saran Singh's book, but that describes what the tokens are about. None of them are dated. I suspect that probably the 1890s was the time that they were, most of them were issued, but I'm not sure, and I'm not aware of any extant records. So what do they look like? Well, that's a good example, and you often find there are 3 or 4 of the tokens that you most frequently encounter. This is one of them. They often come in sets of 4 with these 4 denominations, and you often find them in either uncirculated or proof condition. In fact, many of the tokens don't exist in circulated condition. So whether they were just produced for collectors, or whether they were all handed in 1924, I just don't know. But you are more likely, certainly for the Sandakan Tobacco Company Limited or the Borneo Labuk Tobacco Company Limited, you are far more likely to find these in complete sets of 4 than you are as individual tokens. That's another one. That's seen a bit of circulation, I think. But there are 2 that, when you find them, they do turn up in circulated condition. That is a company that's been researched and located at Ranau, and that usually does turn up in fairly grotty condition. I use technical terminology here. And this is another one, which most of those, they all look as though they've been buried. I don't know whether there was a hoard. There were a few of those on the market about 30 years ago. Those usually are in grotty condition. There was one person, Bob Lyle, who's still with us, but now quite elderly, who specialised in all British Commonwealth country tokens. And Dick Noonan Webb sold his collection, property of a North Country collector. He lives in St Helens in Lancashire. And the prices were through the roof. But his is the best collection that's ever been formed. And that's a list of all of the companies that were represented in Bob's sale. Many of them recorded only from the individual specimens in his collection. So they are, very, very difficult to find. A bit of a sideline, Scrifopoli, I think it's called, or something similar to that. Just a few share certificates I've picked up on my travels for companies, mainly timber or tobacco, many dating from round about the First World War period. I'll just skip through those so you can see the company names. Gold again, you see. I don't know how much gold was ever found, but Right. So those are just a few share certificates. And we can move rapidly on. I'm aware time is pressing, but there isn't much more to go. So Japanese occupation and afterwards, I'm sure you've all seen the banana money, so-called, from the $10 note with a bunch of bananas. These are known as JIMs, Japanese invasion money, and they were issued throughout all of the countries that were invaded and occupied by the Japanese forces. There was a common currency throughout Peninsular Malaysia and Borneo. You can tell by the serial letter M that it was for Malaya, and these circulated throughout the whole of the territories in which we are interested. And there are 7 or 8 denominations there. And these are very common. You can probably get a complete set for 6 or 7 quid off eBay, I would think. After the war, obviously, the Brooke dynasty came to an end. The company came to an end, and the currency, I think it was 1953 that the Borneo currency was finally demonetized, and the currency issued by the Malaysian authorities circulated, and there were coins and banknotes struck by the Malaya and British Borneo Currency Board. You find base metal coins. I've just given you an example of each one struck in base metal. Those are the mintage figures, but bear in mind, most of these circulated in Peninsular Malaya. So we have various denominations, the 50 cents, 20 cents, 10 cents, again, massive mintage numbers, 5 cents. A couple of different types of 1 cent piece, a series of banknotes up to very high denominations. I don't collect these, that's just there as a representative example. We then move on, obviously, to Malaysia, and there have been many different series of banknotes. The coins are there, and particularly there are an extensive number of commemorative coins in base metal, silver, gold, in fancy cases, you name it, you can buy it if that's what you want. And that is a buckle which I would like to think some Sikh member of the company police force wore, and that timed at 39 minutes is my very, very brisk canter through British North Borneo Company Numismatics. Thank you. Any questions?
One quite amusing point is, whilst you were talking, I looked up what I could find about Percival Alfred Dingle, because I thought he was the grandfather of a boy I went to school with, who I seem to remember a North Borneo link. And I couldn't work out whether he was the grandfather, but he was a doctor in North Borneo, and responsible for lots of things, including getting rid of venereal diseases from the native population. But his obituary in the Times made me laugh, because it says, part of his obituary, telling everything he did, he said, he also had that very attribute in a medical man, an utterly legible handwriting. Which I thought, in your obituary, to say that's one of the greatest things you had as a doctor was you could actually write legibly. I thought it was really good.
Well, he can't have been a proper doctor then if you could read his handwriting, can he?
No. That's very good, Mike. I mean, some of that stuff I've never seen before.
Yeah.
You've not been looking for it, that's why, Simon.
No, but company tokens, I mean, they're just remarkable.
Yeah. As I say, that you used to be able to buy those when I was buying them. You might be able to get a set of 4 for 30, 40 quid, that sort of figure, which obviously was a sizable amount. Those sets, when Bob's collection came up at DNW, they were selling for £300-400 a set, and wow. You can't, I'm afraid, you can't just walk into a coin dealer and say, "Can I buy a set of North Borneo tokens?" They do come up just occasionally in auction, and certainly the medals, the originals. I say probably in terms of numbers that are extant and the sorts of prices, I don't think it's a bad comparison. Sarawak combination covers. We all understand what we mean by that, and I think it's a pretty good indication as to how common they are and the price. Although, if you were to walk into any of the leading London stamp dealers, I suspect after a while you would be able to locate 1 or 2 combination covers. That would not be the case with North Borneo Company.
But the obvious question is, North Borneo had these various companies that issued tokens, but there were various sort of limited companies set up in Sarawak between sort of 1860, 1870 and the sort of early 1930s. A couple in Go built and places, but I've never seen tokens from Sarawak ever. Have you?
No, there is one token struck in the early 1960s from Bellingham, which was to do with the supply of tanks of water, and they are the only private tokens from Sarawak that I am aware of. Obviously, James Brooke, the very first numismatic item he struck were the very, very rare Wonkapang tokens, which were made, they're dated 1841 for obvious reasons, but they were struck in the 1850s. There wouldn't be a need for them, perhaps, because there was from 1863 onwards, the Brookes did strike base metal coins and silver coins in significant quantity. And why would you need tokens? I still suspect most of the trade and the native part would be by barter.
Yeah. That token, that 1841 token, I've had one for 25 years, and very proud possession, until, again, Richard Wong pointed out to me, asked me to weigh it. And when I weighed it, he said to me, "It's not real."
No. There are some very convincing forgeries. I have a couple of examples which I bought as replicas. In fact, I just have to break some bad news to a numismatic friend of mine he sent me an email yesterday saying, "I've been looking for one of these for years and I finally bought one for 25 quid on eBay." And I sent him an email last night saying, "Robert, well, if you have, and it's genuine, you can stick a couple of notes on it, and probably a bit more. You are talking significant money for the Wonkapang Sarawak token, but they're nearly all duds, obviously."
Yeah, made by the Chinese and around the early 1900s, I gather. They've got age to them.
Yeah. I haven't heard that. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm not aware of having seen any forgeries distinguished from the genuine until maybe the 1960s. But the answer to your question is I don't know the answer.
Mike, what was the title of Rutter's book that you referred to?
British North Borneo.
Oh, right, okay, I got the wrong one here. Yes, I've got the Pagans of North Borneo. So
no, it's I think it's a semi-official. Right, I have it here. British North Borneo, an account of its history, resources and native tribes. Published Constable and Company, 1922.
I'll have to wait for one to come up maybe in our auction. So
yeah,
a pretty rare book. Has it been reprinted?
I don't know. The last time I was buying Borneo books seriously was probably 20, 30 years ago. I don't think it had been reprinted then, but obviously there have been a lot of reprints subsequently.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's if you're writing a book on North Borneo history, that's a sort of go-to. I'll stop sharing. I don't need to share anymore. I think it's the go-to place.
Is the date in mind.
Was it Rutter?
Rutter.
Yes.
Owen Rutter.
Tregoning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't say I've ever seen it. Interesting. I'll keep an eye open. You never know.
No, we don't have a copy in the library.
Really?
I've got the Pagans of North Borneo by him.
Yes,
No.
so have I. That's the one I just picked out of my one of my many unread books of North Borneo and Sark, I have to say.
And obviously the letters of letters between Baroness Burdett Coots. Yeah.
Anyway, that was lovely stuff to see that. I really did appreciate that, Mike. It was gorgeous.
It's tremendous, Mike. Thank you very much.
I've just got a comment or a question really about the occupation notes. I picked up some when I was in Singapore. I understood that MO was civilian and MI was military, but I've never seen MT, so it could be a complete red herring. I don't know.
I've not heard that, but I must say it's hardly a subject that I've dwelt long on.
Mind you, I was told that by another 11-year-old.
What a memory you have.
In the early part of your talk, Mike, absolutely excellent, you referred to the steam locomotives. Most of those very early photographs you see are of the first two locomotives to be built, Progress and Enterprise. Most of them are actually of Progress. Very rarely see Enterprise in the photograph. They did later buy many more locomotives, but they only had the two to start with.
Oh, I was half right.
Yeah.
And mostly right.
yeah, mostly right. But I mean, it really is a fascinating book. When you know what happened afterwards, they weren't promoting a Ponzi scheme, but yeah, that there was an awful lot of wishful thinking. If you saw it as a sort of a prospectus, they had vivid imaginations as to how the territory would be developed.
Yeah. Well,
what's the book called again, please?
Is it called Views of North Borneo? Just bear with me. I think it's next door. Just a second.
While you've been pondering around, I've looked up to see whether Rutter has been reprinted, and it has by Opus Publications.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That I've got that. Yeah. The library's got 2 copies of that.
Yeah.
Oh, have you now? Right.
Yeah. And I've got a photo. I've got a facsimile copy made about 30 years ago for sale as well, John. If you want it.
If the price is right, yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. That's not with the libraries. That's my personal one. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's just such a wonderful snapshot of snapshots of the country at the time.
Yes, I got the original. I also got 2 reprints, one of which I will put into our auction at some time. I don't need 2 reprints, but it is, as you say, Mike, a lovely thing and very fascinating about the railway as well.
Yeah, I bought my copy when I was a student in Birmingham. I wandered into a second-hand bookshop in the centre of Birmingham. This would be about 1973, and he just had it propped up on a shelf. I paid 30 shillings for it.
You did very well. Mark you, 30 shillings was 30 shillings in those days.
And the point about it was that it just had 30 written in pencil. inside. I mean, I can remember this. This was about 1973, and I couldn't. I thought he meant 30 pence. But stock was all. It never got round to altering the prices of his books. He said, no. He says, lad. No, he says, lad. There could be 30 bob to you. So,
well, I think that was the price of LPs at about that time. I think something like that.
Yeah, there was a wonderful bookshop that who specialised in books in North Borneo and Sarawak and our area up in Beverley.
There was, yeah, and there was one in York as well.
Yeah.
Was it Eastgate Books?
Eastgate Books, yeah. I bought loads of books through him.
Yeah.
Oh, happy days.
Yeah.
Nothing like that on his South End.
Yeah. Eastgate Books. I remember him well. I've still got stuff from him.
Mm. So it was you who used to get the books that I couldn't afford then, Simon?
Not then. I was a young naval officer with 3 kids. I always spent more on books than I did on stamps in those days because I could take a book to see and read it.
Yeah.
And I could never take the stamps to see.
What's been the better investment then, Simon? Books or stamps? What's been the better investment, book or stamps, since those
Neither
days?
investments, are they? Neither investments. I would say stamps because the immense pleasure that the stamps have given me over the years. You can't put a monetary value on pleasure, but it really has stamps. But the financial investment, very few people ever make money on the stamps that they bought.
No,
very few people.
Very good advice. Don't buy for investment, buy for pleasure.
Yeah,
I'd say actually probably the territories we collect, if you've been there long enough, probably they haven't been a bad investment. And I would guess that probably the philatelic and the numismatic have maybe appreciated in value in a very similar way. And that, I'm sure, is a result of the market in the Far East.
But it goes in trends because sort of 15, 20 years ago, any of the, the 1869, 1871, 1875 Sarawak issues, everybody was after them. And so prices were going through the roof. And this is a good one for you, Peter. You can pick the stuff up for a song now because it's not an area that is very popular. But the Delarue area, anything decent, any proofs, Delarue proofs, Spink recently, they just go through the roof.
Mm. Mm.
And airmails. Look at the price of some of the airmails recently.
Yeah.
Yes. Not true of Labuan, funnily enough. Some proofs there have actually reduced in value quite significantly over the last 10, 20 years, which is strange because there's not many of them.
But Ivan and I were having a conversation 2 days ago, Ivan, that, take for instance, RAF flights. They used to cost a fortune at the Sarawak auction. There again, you had John Rogers after them, Bernard Larder after them, Patrick Cassell's after them, and Neville Watterson after them.
Yeah.
None of those buggers would ever put their hand down. Well, then they went out of favour and they didn't make any money at all. But now there's a new group of collectors that are collecting them because you can pick them up at now a reasonable market price.
Yeah. Yeah.
True.
Yeah. And everything goes through phases.
Yeah.
As you know, I sold one on eBay recently and got more than I expected for it, to be honest.
More than you pay, Evie? More than you pay with inflation, or how do you say?
I can't remember. This was something I acquired in Australia 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
But I haven't got a record of what I paid for it.
But you talk about DNW, Mike. That very early banknote that I've got that's in horrible condition, which I use to illustrate my Office of Registry cover.
Yes, I know the one.
Yeah, Dixon, Noon and Webb. Christopher someone there. I forget his name.
Chris Webb.
Chris Webb. Suggested to me that the cover, the banknote's probably worth a lot more than the cover.
You'd be looking at 5 figures for that banknote.
Yeah, yeah. Even though it's in a horrible condition, it's one of the earliest known.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a unique item as far as I know.
And you probably know that the last banknote auction at Spink, throw out $1 note, but with a serial number 2, went for £27,000.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, when you start looking at high ticket banknotes, from wherever in the world, but particularly in the Far East, they absolutely dwarf prices for good stamps and postal history, other than the absolute, you're really, really expensive stuff. But banknotes often sell for prices in 5 figures, often. Yeah. And of course, grading is everything now, both in terms of coins and banknotes. You can get them slabbed, which, they're encased in plastic. They get an official grading, and people collect them. They're not bothered what it is. They want to know what its grade is. And my idea of coins and tokens and banknotes is you can actually pick the damn things up and hold them carefully, obviously. But that's the way the hobby has gone, and more material is appearing slabbed.
I see it, Roger.
Roger's got something here.
A slab.
What's that, Roger? Couldn't see you.
You're muted, Roger.
You're muted. Roger, you're muted. Oh, he's still muted.
Yeah, no, I'm now unmuted.
That's better.
I thought the other day I'd actually have that engraved on my gravestone. You could say, Roger, you're muted. It's I use it as a paperweight. It's 1980s, I think, States of Guernsey note, which was given as a souvenir to a friend of mine who put it into a bring and buy sale. But it's quite nice. It's got Thomas de la Rue on the back.
Oh, right.
What denomination is it, Roger?
It's a £5.
Yeah, daft as it may seem, you may be looking at about 50 quid for that now.
Yeah, I know the origin of it. These were prepared. The chief executives of all the banks that subscribe to Visa certainly 20 years ago, used to have an annual congress. And one particular year, the chief executives went to, they were hosted by the States of Guernsey, and they were given these as souvenirs. So it has a very low, the number is, it starts with an A, and they'd only just issued them, and they were given those as takeaways, as things to take home to the kids.
But Mike, we go to philatelic exhibitions and see people stamped, beautifully displayed. The banknote people do the same thing.
I'm not a banknote collector. There is an organisation called the International Banknote Society, and they do have conventions. It is international. You don't have special, in terms of physically meeting up, you don't have specialist banknote collectors as far as I know. And yes, banknotes are something that you can exhibit, I suppose, like you can exhibit stamps and postal history. The problem comes with coins and tokens and so on, where it has to be done by, in old money, slideshows. So, you and other collectors now are suddenly cottoning onto the idea of doing PowerPoint presentations and Zoom presentations and so on. I've been doing slideshow presentations to numismatic societies for the other stuff that I collect numismatically for 40 years. And that's the norm, because you can't sort of glue a coin to a board and put it up in a display frame. So this is standard sort of presentation. Obviously, you can put more detail, you can do fancy tricks with a Zoom presentation, but that's the way that numismatic societies have been running since Adam was a lad.
Wow.
We've been going for an hour, and it may be this is the point to thank Mike for showing us some wonderful things that we've not seen before, and to thank him for that. And
I have inquired whether people would like these roughly monthly lectures to continue as the lockdown, certainly in the UK, draws to a close. Any either offers of talks or comments on whether we continue, perhaps take a break over the summer and have a few in the autumn, I'd welcome email comment. But Mike, great talk today. We're very grateful and wish everybody well. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, my comment on that, Roger, would be I have really enjoyed coming to these meetings for all sorts of reasons. I find it difficult to get to the weekend conferences, usually because it clashes with the British Token Congress, of which I happen to be chairman, so I can't really get out of that. But I've really enjoyed the presentations, and it's been great variety. So I'd love them to continue, but you might run out of speakers, and I certainly can't offer you anything else other than the odd sort of 10 minutes if we're having members displays. But I think it'd be great if you could continue them.
Well, we'll see what we can do. But if anyone else wants to email me with ideas, comments,
I suggested, Roger, on Sunday that something like we had with John and Claire, that we pick a topic, and rather than someone do a half-hour, three-quarter display, 2 or 3 people show 4 or 5 slides to encourage discussion, which is very, very useful because you've actually got something in front of you. As you said, much better than looking at display boards.
Mm.
As I can't travel now, these have been an absolute godsend.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Len, would you be in a position at some stage to do a talk for us?
Maybe in the future, but just at the moment, I've had to withdraw from all my displays.
Yes.
Yes. Time.
Yeah. We'll keep it in mind, though. But thank you for that.
And Frank.
Yes.
Yes.
Have you still got your wonderful ship and Packabo collection?
Same time, so it's all getting very confusing.
I have, but I really haven't got the time to put it together for a display.
Perhaps when I start writing up my ship collection, I've written a lot of the ship collection, some of the unusual ship covers like the Margaret and things like that, and the Gladys. I'll try and put that together.
I don't go for those. I haven't got those. Mine are nearly all post-war.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, perhaps we'll take our leave of you, but thanks to everybody for today, and we'll see if we can find a few more volunteers to give a talk or two before too long. But thanks very much indeed.
Right, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye. Thanks, Mike.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Very nice.
Cheers.
Very nice.
Much appreciated.